a playground apparatus away, the area will be regraded and set up, and new playground apparatus can be brought in at a later date. So we're talking to the park board about that. Lest you think there's a problem there, there is somewhat. That tot lot is actually sitting on state property and is there by permit to the park board. MnDOT has said it will reissue a permit and re-up it. The park board has said they're willing to come back in. So we've got the parties lined up to keep the tot lot.
Thank you. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments are related to Councilmember Glynn's comments. We've been trading a couple of emails here. One of the reasons why I'm joining this public hearing today, I don't sit on the TPW committee, but of course this project is really important to the 9th Ward and it touches the 9th Ward. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been at 3 different meetings, Lake Street Council, the Midtown Greenway Coalition, Corcoran Neighborhood Organization, where this issue of public art has come up in relationship to this transit project. And the general theme is that the community is very concerned that that we might duplicate the same mistakes that were made at the Lake Street and Hiawatha Transit Access Station. Well, maybe it's not the technical name, but the public transit area. So folks are really sensitive to making sure that this public art component gets addressed and that we're able to support it. So from your perspective, is there room for engagement and for other partners outside of the municipalities and the jurisdictions, such as philanthropy or private corporations? I know that this area typically has been pretty active with the Phillips partnership. I'm not sure what those folks are doing now. I'm having a meeting with Lewis Smith later this week, but would be curious to know your insights or ideas about how you think we can engage philanthropy and private corporations to help with some of these issues, which I'm hearing is around cost, that no one has been able to put money forward or prioritize money in investing in public art, which is connected to the aesthetic component that you were talking about. And I do also want to forward you a really good summary from the Midtown Greenway Coalition of things we can address to help with the way that people perceive the space and move in that space that have to deal with, as you were mentioning, all the surfaces that this station is going to have. So we'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Oh, thank you, Council Member. And thank you for your leadership during the process. I really appreciate the help that your office has given us and the patience that you've had over the last couple of years as we've tried to bring this to this point today. I think there are probably 2 issues as you take a look at and talk about the Lake Hiawatha location. One is the lack of light under the bridge, we'll say. Generally, it's the Hiawatha Highway Bridge. And then second is the art and how it is not really a great looking art area, or it doesn't have a lot of great public art at Lake and Hiawatha. In terms of the first one, the lighting, that's under the category of let's not do that again. And our experience should teach us that under the bridges, the concern about having light for people to feel that there isn't trouble under there, it's not dark and imposing. Like today, if you look at the bridge today, you see it's a dark box that you're walking toward, Spartan at best. When you look at Lake and Hiawatha, it can be dark under the Hiawatha Bridge. And the plan for lighting under this bridge is much better than that. And the design for the bridge itself, actually there are 3 of them, one for northbound 35, one for southbound 35, and the middle one for the transit station itself. The Minnesota Department of Transportation is just about to award contracts for the design of those. So that hasn't even started, so we can incorporate that lighting. That's a good thing. Then the aspect of art that the council member was talking about, actually both council members are talking about, is one when you stop and you take a look at what we did at the Lake and Hiawatha. It was built in 1993. And then when Jenny and I were working on the Lake Street improvements back around 2007, we actually received Hennepin received a McKnight Foundation grant to do a little bit of lighting, and we fixed those, the artwork on the abutments, the north and south abutments on the blue tile. You see that. Local artists came up with that, and we worked with the neighborhood. It was trying to do an after the fact type of improvement by way of artwork. I think as we're looking at it, we hear loud and clear that issue of what is the public art. There are a lot of spaces here that can't afford to be white or gray without some sort of a life to them. And as you talk about it, is that aesthetics or is it art? If I have a $10 bill and I can pay for it for aesthetics, I'll call it aesthetics and give you a $10 bill. But if I can't give you the $10 bill because it's art, just by way of public definition by some agencies, you can't pay for public art, then I'm not going to call it art, I'm going to call it aesthetics and make sure it works. So you get stuck on terminology depending upon which agency you're in. We know the desired outcome, and that's what we want to work toward together, calling it art or aesthetics, making sure it gets done.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a really important part of the discussion. As another council member who represents this area, our constituents are really taking a lot of impact from this project. And we are getting this excellent transit service to serve the people who live within the neighborhoods nearby. But I think the importance of the public art piece is to help mitigate some of that impact of living near a freeway, of having the air quality impacts, of having the noise impacts, of having the traffic impacts on local streets. And so I think it's part about how we can continue to make this place still a local neighborhood and not just a place that people are driving through. And so that piece about who's designing the art and how can it reflect the community nearby, I think those are things that, even though maybe a very small portion of an overall project budget, make a really huge difference to the communities that, again, are really taking a lot of impact for our regional transportation system. So I think others had mentioned that we passed a resolution last time through the council, just reiterating our city's support for working together with the agency partners to look for funding for art. We have our small percent that council members Reich and Glidden made sure that we have, but it's likely not enough in this project to really make a meaningful impact. And I think we're all hopeful that we can work together with everyone to find the resources we need to make sure that there's actually standalone art here, as Councilmember Glidden mentioned.
And Councilmember Bender, I'd agree with you. It's the finish. It's when people walk away from building it, what does it look like, and how does it invite people to come to it, use it, feel comfortable about it, and not just have to drag themselves through an area. You don't want that. You want people to step back and take notice, especially if you're talking about the investment along the connection between the Greenway and Lake Street itself, linear. But that's where you bring something together and make it inviting so people actually will stroll looking up instead of trudging looking down. That's the outcome you want. You want people strolling looking up.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation. I was going to let Peter. I'd ask Peter Reginius from the Mayor's Office to please make comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the Mayor, I'd just like to express her support for the action you're about to take, and to put it briefly in the historical context. It is hard to overstate the influence that the City of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis City Council have had on 35W and transit on this corridor. For over a decade, the City Council has taken a series of courageous votes on behalf of a consistent vision that the freeway need not be simply a funnel for cars, but could be an incredible transit amenity. Over 10 years ago, the city denied municipal consent for the Crosstown project because it wasn't prioritizing transit in this corridor. And through the municipal consent process and the agreement that was forged after the denial, we won a series of commitments about how this additional lane would be used to prioritize transit. Then, of course, there is the reboot vote that you've already heard about. Since you've already heard about that, I'll just remind you that we don't need to wonder about whether or not that was necessary, because we can look at the design that is before us and we can ask ourselves, would that have fit in the empty space that was reserved for transit under the original design? And the answer is no, not even close. If we had proceeded without the reboot, the amount of space available for the future transit station would not have accommodated the design that we are now able to vote on, because the city took a position that we should be designing from the inside out, starting with transit in the fast lane. If we had not done that, we would not have the design or even the option to implement the design before us. And yet again, this is not just about the present, it is also about the future. We also used the municipal consent process for the reconstruction of the bridge, the 35W bridge that collapsed, to make it clear that that bridge over the Mississippi should be designed so that this project can be extended to the northern suburbs in the future. It is unlikely that what we are today calling the Orange Line Bus Rapid Transit project could have ever happened without the leadership and vision of the City Council, including then Councilmember Hodges, Councilmember Glidden, then Councilmember Lilligren, and all of you who have stuck with this project over a very long gestation period. We will now create the new gold standard in how transit can be integrated into a freeway to benefit the public using all available modes. And this philosophy is the one that we will bring. Councilmember Gordon and the mayor have already been working on this. This is the same philosophy we will bring to future consideration of 94 and 35W north of downtown, that we will design from the inside out, starting with putting transit in the fast lane. In so doing, we have had and will continue to have a huge impact on transit in this region by showing the whole region just how great bus rapid transit can be. So on behalf of all of you, all of the staff who have worked on this, who have just been doing a fantastic job, Steve Kotke and his whole team, I mean, talk about a long wait and lots of work. But the mayor just would express her appreciation to all of you, to the folks from all the other agencies who participated in this together, building a common vision that now has bipartisan urban suburban support. We've turned controversy into consensus, and we couldn't have done it with all that work. So on behalf of the mayor, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Councilmember Glidden, followed by Councilmember Bender.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, you know, I'm glad that Pierre Reginius mentioned history, and I hate to do it, but I got to talk about it a little bit more, just because this is a project that has such a long trajectory. And 10 to 15 years ago, we were a very divided city on what to do with this project. And I think agencies around us were kind of throwing up their hands with, you know, how can we bring together a solution to move this project forward. And the project at that time, of course, was primarily just a roads project, a freeway project that seemed to grow and grow and grow until it just kind of became overcome by its own weight, it felt like. I really have to thank some legislators for helping us along the way, because it was at that kind of point where things were, we had the vote on municipal consent for the Crosstown Commons, that we had the feasibility study about bus rapid transit on 35W. And it was, I think, 2004 or 2005 when that was authored. And that was something that was led by MnDOT. So I think that was also significant in partnership with the Met Council. And our Senator Scott Dibble, I know, was very involved in asking that to move forward, as were partners. Mary Liz Holberg, who today is a Dakota County Commissioner and at the time was a state representative, and State Representative Frank Hornstein, who talked about how having this bus rapid transit that would be able to go from Lakeville to downtown Minneapolis was a vision that we should all embrace. And I think that was really the kickoff to thinking that we could have a different vision, because there is no doubt that Lake Street is a linchpin to how the Orange Line works as a whole. So it's a very important intersection and transit station to the neighborhood, to the businesses around it, and to the larger business community. But no doubt it is a linchpin to making that Orange Line bus rapid transit be able to happen in the first place. And to be able to see stakeholders, council members and mayors all the way along this corridor, again from Lakeville to Minneapolis, step forward and support our project at the legislature has also, I think, really made me proud that we were able to get this project to this point. I feel like I've learned a lot about how important it is to come together around goals with big transit projects, because it was this reboot resolution that the City Council took in 2007 that, frankly, I think also gave hope to our partners that, okay, now we understand what does the City of Minneapolis want to be able to accomplish goals, and it was refocusing back on Lake Street for the access parts of this project. Developing a plan for high quality inside lane multimodal bus rapid transit, and also the connection, high quality connection to the Midtown Greenway from a Lake Street station. And I think setting those goals, even back then, we still refer back to those goals today and thinking about how we want to make sure that this project is doing what we want it to do. And so I think that has been really, really helpful, and it's been a guidance to me in how to think about other projects. I think what's also really interesting is to think, you know, what might happen if this Orange Line is as successful as we think it might be. I personally think this is going to be a tremendously successful project. And again, I think how Lake Street does as a station will be instrumental in supporting the Orange Line as a whole. But I foresee that we are going to be coming back in 20 years, 15 years, and saying, how can we augment what we've done already in establishing the Orange Line? How can even more riders access what might be that Orange Line or whatever continues to be called into the future? And so that's why I really appreciate also MnDOT letting us know that 38th Street could be considered for a future station, you know, sometime, that we're not closing off that possibility. So we don't know what the future might bring, and being able to think about that is important. I think that this will be a very challenging project. We already know that construction on this project will take at least 4 years. I appreciate that this project made it into the Senate bonding bill, which was just released yesterday. And I want to thank Senator Stumpf, who I understand talked quite a bit about this project and its importance to the region, and the concern, if this project is not funded on time, that we will have perhaps 7 years of construction that will impact the entire region and that will impact the neighbors in this space. And so I hope that we do the right thing and the smart thing, and we're able to not only take our vote to approve this today, but we're able to get this project funded this year and on time, and take advantage of all the investments that have already gone into this route. I also just want to say a big thank you. One other thing I just want to mention. You know, along the way, there's been all these different little issues that have cropped up that, frankly, for other projects would have been really big issues. But in the context of this project, they've seemed like smaller issues. One of them was trying to balance this really big transit and roads project between historic properties that were both on the east side of the freeway and on the west side of the freeway. And so, again, I think this really is a testament to community letting us, being a partner in the project and letting us know their concerns, but staff from multiple jurisdictions understanding when we got to figure this out and we need to make this work. And and essentially making it work. There's a lot of staff who have worked on this project for a very long time. So it's probably impossible to mention them all, but I feel like I've been at tables with you for 10 years. And I just have to say I really appreciate your dedication to thinking through an important project for the region and for our city, for the county, and how to put that together and really keep your eye on the prize. I just think we have good fortune to have such professional, dedicated staff from MnDOT, from the Met Council, from Hennepin County, from the city of Minneapolis, who have played such leadership roles. And again, Jenny Hager and Jim Grube have really been the face of this project for quite a while, and we really appreciate you and how you've really worked with a big team. And I want to say thank you to Steve Kotke. As I'm going to cry like the Dickens when Steve says his goodbyes at his retirement party, but I have to say this is just yet another big accomplishment under your belt, that you have seen this project through the leadership of your staff and other partners to the end, through the many issues that have come up. And I would say I hope that you feel proud that we have helped design this, influence this into something that the city of Minneapolis and hopefully our residents too will support and benefit from. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask staff some questions, but I'm happy to do that after the public hearing, if that's however you want to handle that.
I think we should open the public hearing at some point. So no further commentary. I will open the public hearing, and this is the public hearing for the item before us. Anyone wish to speak? Anyone signed in? Oh, we have one signed in. Michael Wilson, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, council members. My name is Michael Wilson. I live at 3439 St. Louis Avenue. I'm here as the chair of the Improvements Committee for the Midtown Greenway Coalition, but I'm also here as a biker, as a pedestrian, as a shopper, as a resident for 42 years of South Minneapolis. I share in everybody's excitement that this project is finally moving forward, fixing things that should have been done 60 years ago. I certainly appreciate all the work that it's taken to get to this point. I think we are so lucky to have Mr. Grube as you said, as the public face and the person who, as he told Eric Roper at the Star Tribune, we're hoping for controlled chaos for 4 years as this project is constructed. If anybody can bring us to that point, I'm sure Mr. Grube can. It's just exciting to see all of this happen, particularly the transit and the Green Crescent connection to the Midtown Greenway. There is one part of this, though, that I feel is not there yet, and several of you have talked about it this morning, and that's the crossing underneath the bridge at Lake Street. The resolution that you're looking at today talks about there being 8,000 jobs and 12,000 households within a 10-minute walk of the Lake Street station. Those people, I believe, need to have more consideration in the design of what this is going to look like underneath. I'm afraid that we're going to end up with another example of Minneapolis dreary, the details of this project that we're looking at this point. The surface treatments will be interesting, but there just is more that can be done. All of us have had the experience of coming back from other cities and saying, wow, Boston did this, or Seattle did it, Portland did this, or New York did this on the High Line, or Austin, or San Antonio coming back. It would be great to have people leaving Minneapolis, going back to their cities and saying, wow, Minneapolis had an 8 to 10 lane freeway and a BRT line and a commercial corridor underneath, and they hit a home run. It'd be great to have people going back to their cities and talking about what we've accomplished in Minneapolis. I don't think the plans are there yet. At the Greenway Coalition meetings, one of our members has talked about Hiawatha Lake 2.0. I think that's one way of looking at this. There are reasons to believe certainly that this is a very different sort of project, but it's going to take more attention to make sure that it happens. The slide that shows of the Lake Street level, it looks like you could take your suntan lotion and a deck chair and go sit there during the day. I don't think that's going to be it. What we don't want to have happen is a few years from now, people saying that this is dark and it's dirty and it's dreary and it's unsafe. We can take steps to make sure that that doesn't happen now. Mr. Grube says that certainly many of these aspects of this project are set in stone, are moving forward, but this part is not too late. One thing that was brought up at one of the public hearings on April 5th was there is no median on Lake Street for people wanting to cross from one side, from the north side to the south side and vice versa. People who are mobility impaired. There was one woman at the meeting who is very mobility impaired, and she expressed that concern. There is no provision, as I understand it at this point, for a median. So if you have your little kids on their bicycles and you're trying to shepherd them from one side of Lake Street to the other, you don't have a safety zone in the middle. You have to make it all the way across. In cold weather, in icy weather, snowy weather, wet weather, we don't have that going across. I think that's something that really needs to be looked at to make sure that we have these 12,000 households within a 10-minute walk of Lake Street Station. Let's keep them in mind and what their needs are. You talked about in your resolution that this will be an iconic feature in the area. However, the current project scope and budget does not include public art. I appreciate very much the conversation that's gone on. Thank you for emphasizing that. I want to thank particularly Councilmember Cano for coming to the Improvements Committee meeting at the Greenway Coalition last week and hearing many of our thoughts and our concerns. Councilmember, thank you very much for bringing those forward. I hope, as I said, people will visit Minneapolis. They'll see this Lake Street transit exit. They'll go back to their own cities and they'll say, wow, Minneapolis hit a home run on this. I don't think we're there yet, and I hope we can. This project is the big kahuna. It's just wonderful to see it finally happening and all the work that's gone into it. We have this one piece left, and I hope we can address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else sign in? Anyone else wish to come forward? Anyone else wish to come forward? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment, and then I have some questions for staff really relating to the construction impacts and that time frame going forward. So I just wanted to briefly echo Councilmember Glidden's comments. This is such a significant moment for, I think, our region, where we're building what I think is also going to be an extraordinary transit service and a model for other lines across our region and probably across the country. This is going to provide some of the fastest and most frequent transit service to downtown for my constituents and those around, as well as opportunities to reach jobs in the South Metro. And that is so important for the folks that are living nearby and the opportunities that that provides. I am lucky to have inherited the leadership of the policymakers that came before that really advocated for that transit component. And we've been meeting monthly about this project since I took office. And I just particularly wanted to thank, in addition to all of the people that Councilmember Glidden thanked, Councilmember Glidden, who was the only returning council member who was part of that group, who really helped shepherd this along and help us ground in the history of this project, and Peter Wagenius from Mayor Betsy Hodges' office, who played that role as well. And your two leadership on this project has been so instrumental in making sure that we got here in a successful moment. And then staff, who's put in so many countless hours of going to neighborhood meetings and the sound walls alone with Ms. Hager and Mr. Grube, just going above and beyond. I know you door knocked in the neighborhoods where folks were not coming to meetings, and that was just one component of the public outreach for this project, but very notable. So then I just wanted to shift to asking about how this project is going to impact our constituents as we go forward. And I have a series of questions. I'll just ask them all so you can decide who's best to answer, and then I'm happy to repeat them if needed. I wanted to know how long we expect construction to last. What's the plan for transit along 35W during the construction phase? When will we learn more about the impacts of traffic on our local street network? And how will we work to ensure that pedestrian and bicycle safety is really front and center in planning for how our local street network is impacted by this construction project? And I know we've been talking about this, so it shouldn't be a surprise.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I'm not surprised. Thank you for the questions. I'll see if I can recall all of them. I think the first question was just generally, when are we going to know more about construction impacts and how long this is going to take? We are launching into an analysis phase of construction scheduling and phasing. So we don't yet know how long the construction will actually take or how it will be phased. We do know, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, that it's at least 4 years of construction. And we're looking at options to try to minimize that timeline. It won't be less than 4 years, I can almost guarantee. But how do we keep that to the absolute minimum, and how do we mitigate and minimize those impacts to the community? One of the parts of the analysis is transit, and what kind of role can transit play in helping to mitigate those impacts and keep the traffic flowing along the corridor, and more importantly, the people throughput flowing along the corridor. And so we're looking at various options for transit. None of those decisions have been made yet. In fact, that analysis is just going forward. There will be community engagement going forward for the next year to talk through this analysis, the options, the impacts, the trade-offs, and to get their input on those decisions as we go forward. And that will include continued work with our advisory committees to talk about and make sure that we're thinking through those non-motorized facilities within our neighborhoods that really help to maintain the livability and the access to, through, and around those neighborhoods.
Thank you. How will those decisions be made? For example, about the ways that any lanes that would be available on the freeway, how that space would be allocated for transit or for single occupancy vehicles. And then how can we ensure that the city and Metro Transit and all the agencies that are working on this, have voice in that decision-making process?
So, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, we will continue engaging with the policymakers throughout, as we have been for the last 5+ years. Some of those decisions will come down to the responsible agency. I know Metro Transit is taking a look at the options that they have available, what they can do with their existing fleet, what the impacts might be for the variety of options. So it's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out as we go, because there's going to be different decisions made by different folks, and then different decisions that can be made as a group, as we have been going with this project all along.
Thank you. That's helpful. I do want to just make a brief statement then about this issue. And I think as MnDOT and Metro Transit and the city work together to plan what is a really significant impact on our communities, I think that there are policy decisions to make about how to handle the transportation system and space during this time. And we can use this as an opportunity to encourage people to use transit, to make sure that people are encouraged and welcomed to continue to walk and bicycle in our neighborhoods. And I hope that's the direction that we go in. I think that would reflect the Complete Streets policy that MnDOT has adopted, the Complete Streets policy that Hennepin County adopted, the one that we are about to adopt as a city. I think it would really build upon all of the work that we've been doing together. But I think there are significant differences in how we could handle the next 4 or 5 or 6 years that will have a big impact on the folks that live nearby. And when we make decisions about how to allocate space in the 5 or 6 years during this construction project, that will matter to people as they're trying to get their children to school, or trying to continue to bicycle in their neighborhood or take transit. We don't want to lose transit riders during this construction project. If anything, we would hope to gain transit riders in order to set ourselves up well for success of this investment. And so again, I think these are policy decisions that we will be making. And I think we've been very clear as a city where we stand. I do have some small amendments to offer to Councilmember Reich's motion that I've just talked with him about, that I emailed around, that just sort of really re-emphasize that in our own resolution here. So again, I'm thankful that there will be community engagement and engagement of all of our city policymakers in this as we look to how we can make sure that this construction phase is an opportunity for us to support all transportation modes and really protect the quality of life of folks who are living near here.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much, and I'm very supportive of this. It's exciting to see it coming forward. I'm assuming that we have the support of Met Transit, even though you folks didn't get up and tell us how great this is going to work for you on board. I was curious a little bit because of the one speaker who made public comments about Lake Street itself and what happens there underneath the bridge, and he talked a little bit about some kind of a median to give some safety for that large crossing that if you include the bus bays, it looks like it's just so many lanes. We're not giving any kind of municipal consent at this time to the actual Lake Street design under the bridge, are we? To the lane configuration? Are we approving that? Does our action today preclude the opportunity for the county or the city to come in as a partner and put in a median in the future? Or are we committed to those left turn lanes and all the traffic lanes with this vote? Is that clear?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon, yes, it's clear. The municipal consent is for, if you will, the footprint of the project, not the technical detail of the project. So as you're talking about lane widths, or is there a median here or a median there, that's not part of municipal consent. That's the larger footprint that it moves forward. The devil's in the details, Councilmember Gordon, and that's what we're working on, trying to finish up a number of different things, lane widths, configurations, and what have you. We're not done with that yet.
So the potential of improving that crossing underneath the bridge is still there. We can still, I forget what he referred to, but be the best example possible in the country.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Gordon, we'd certainly like to be the best example in the country. We'd like to have people from Denver going away saying Minneapolis, instead of Minneapolis going away from Denver saying Denver. So let's give them something to talk about, is what I'd say. From the standpoint of there are always conflicting values that we have to balance off in terms of access to properties and safety for pedestrians and movement of a number of different people. Those are the details that we have to work out to make sure we're doing this right.
I appreciate that. And I think that we can keep working on that. I think that one of the things that we want to, that's in the resolution already, but I hope we emphasize, is that we do want to give maybe prioritization, preference to pedestrians and to transit here. And if we're really going to build a transit station that works up there, we're going to have to make sure that pedestrians can get access to it. Well, I also, listening to Mr. Reginius earlier, was wondering if there might be room for some kind of addition in the beginning of the resolution where we're talking just about Minneapolis's general approach. I think he had a line in there that had to do with Minneapolis supports building our freeways from the inside out with transit in the fast lane. And this especially is helpful for me in terms of when we're looking at 94 and the construction that's going to happen there, or also in 35W when we're heading north. So I might see if I can have a small amendment, or if there's openness to that. It would just be near the beginning when we're talking about our general approach. I think it is something that we have supported for a long time, and whether that transit is rail, because as I recall, when we built the 35W bridge, we actually made sure that it was strong enough to hold commuter rail or rail potentially, and it's definitely wide enough if it's not rail to have BRT. So I might I'll email out maybe a possible amendment there too. I think that there might be some other amendments for the resolution.
And given that sort of working through, I think my suggestion might be is we just approve of the thing we had before us because it was posted, and then I know there's going to be amendment from you and certainly Councilmember Bender. If we can just have that ready for the full council vote and highlight those things and have it well crafted and have it be one package.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Is that okay?
I emailed mine. I think it's up to you. If you want to move mine, you have it from you.
Okay. Then I will just move, I think Bender's has already been distributed, so I will move that one if everyone's got it, the verbiage.
The email.
The clerk has it. Maybe you can just sort of highlight verbally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, I had two small changes to the resolution as authored by Councilmember Reich. These are on page 4 under construction impacts. And the first change is to say prioritization of non-motorized facilities and their importance to maintaining local accessibility and livability. And the second change is in the next sentence, which would say the city supports efforts by Metro Transit to increase transit use during construction, and would add the phrase and provide advantage for transit as one means of mitigation.
So on the motion to amend, is there any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dissenting nay, that carries. So we now have an amended version. Mr. Guinness?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note to facilitate our progress towards the final vote that both of the two things you've heard are consistent with the city practice already. When we were going through the process for the Crosstown project, we passed a very similar language to what Councilmember Bender has suggested, recognizing that the transit ridership on 35W is already the highest non-rail ridership corridor in the state. I mean, there's already a lot. It's not as visible because it comes in the form of Metro Transit buses and Southwest buses and a whole series, but the ridership is already very strong and yet still has great potential to grow. To Councilmember Gordon's point, the language he's talking about vis-a-vis 94 is what we have already been advancing in our conversations with MnDOT and Met Council. So I think both of these two things that have been discussed are consistent with the approach that we have taken and that are taking for ongoing conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. And then Councilmember Gordon?
Well, so I could read my amendment, but I'm also comfortable waiting. I wasn't sure if since we've just approved.
You're ready to go and
Yeah.
clerk has it?
Well, I'm not sure if I've sent it to the clerk yet. Let me see if I can email it to the committee members. And here's what I have so far. Whereas the city of Minneapolis supports designing all freeways in Minneapolis, including I-35W north of downtown and the entirety of I-94 for bus rapid transit with transit in the fast lanes. And I don't have the resolution in front of me, but I think it should be about in the third whereas from the top.
So that language in the third whereas, there's a motion to amend. Is there any further conversation or question regarding that? On the motion to amend, as stated by Councilmember Gordon, all those in favor say aye. Dissenting nay. That has been amended. Any further conversation on the main motion before us, which is approving municipal consent with our resolution as amended? Any further conversation? See none, all in favor say aye.
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 Dissenting nay. That carries. Thank you very much. We have a lot of work before us because I think we have that controlled chaos planning to do. But nonetheless, I think we've demonstrated a lot of interest in what has been termed to be the Big Kahuna project in the city of Minneapolis. Thank you. Well, we do have more on the agenda, and we have another public hearing, another big project, and that is the Washington Avenue Reconstruction and Streetscape Project from Hennepin Avenue to Fifth Avenue South. And this is a public hearing regarding the project approval, assessment, and areaway abandonment. Director Kaki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bev Wormka, who is our project engineer from Transportation Engineering and Design, will start the presentation, and then we'll have our county partner explain a bit more of the project after Bev.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Council Committee members. I am Beverly Wormka from the Public Works Transportation Engineering and Design Group. Here before you today is the public hearing for Washington Avenue from Hennepin Avenue to Fifth Avenue South in downtown. This is a Hennepin County-led project with city participation. The city has funding in this project that's in the approximate total of $3.38 million. It's made up of MSA, net debt bonds, assessments, and sewer and water revenue. And as consistent with previous county projects done in the city, we use our uniform assessment rate, and the influence zone area method for assessments to apply for a portion of the funding on the project. We use the 2016 assessment rates, which are $2.52 a square foot for non-residential properties and 84 cents a square foot for residential properties. This project also includes a streetscape component. Some of that cost of the streetscape is bought down through other funding sources. However, the streetscape rate is assessed at $76.99 per lineal foot along the corridor. So we're here today to approve for approval to proceed with the work for the construction as well as the streetscape, to issue and sell the assessment bonds, and to order the removal and abandonment of the areaways. I will be happy to answer any questions now or following Nathan's brief overview of the project.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members. My name is Nathan Ellingson. I'm with Hennepin County Transportation Department. I'm the design project manager for the reconstruction of Washington Avenue. I'm here today just to give a brief overview of the project history, how we got to where we are today, and then talk a little bit about the current project status and the upcoming construction. Use this. Show up on your screen. So as Bev mentioned, this is Washington Avenue, County Road 152 in downtown Minneapolis. The construction limits are Hennepin Avenue to 5th Avenue South. It's a full reconstruction project. It's actually a county turnback project. We received funding from MnDOT to take over the jurisdictional authority on the roadway and to make improvements on the corridor as well. The project actually shows up on county books as early as 1998, although the project as we know it today really took steam in 2011, 2012 when we undertook a pretty substantial public engagement effort. We were looking to gain feedback from the public and the various stakeholders and ultimately try to define what the vision of the project was. We did this through multiple design charrettes, public meetings, as well as online public surveys. Through the process, we found that there was a strong desire to not only make general improvements to the corridor pavement surface, but also to green the corridor through the addition of trees and landscaping, also to add dedicated bike facilities on the corridor and to improve the pedestrian facilities of the corridor as well. The preferred layout option, as I've placed up here today, is resulted in 2 through lanes of traffic in each direction on the corridor. Dedicated turn lanes are added at key intersections, and also westbound we have right turn lanes for the entire length of the corridor. One-way protected bike lanes or cycle tracks were added in each direction, located behind the curb at sidewalk elevation. We've greened the public realm with irrigated tree and planting beds and enhanced streetscape amenities on the corridor, including benches and bike racks. In fact, the benches that we plan to use on this project are being salvaged from Nicollet Mall. And finally, the improved pedestrian facilities include widened sidewalks, corner bump outs at the intersections to minimize the crossing distance across Washington Avenue, and enhanced crosswalk markings, and the addition of APS push buttons at each intersection. And ultimately, this project received your City Council approval back in February of 2014 on the preliminary layout. Since then, we've been working with the various stakeholders and advisory committees to really fine-tune the design elements of the project, including treatments to the cycle track and treatments to the streetscape amenities. Such engagements included multiple meetings with the Minneapolis Bicycle Advisory Committee, Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities, the Hennepin County Bicycle Advisory Committee, substantial coordination with the Minneapolis Downtown Improvement District, and numerous meetings with each and every one of the property owners on the corridor. This graphic represents some of the elements that you'll see in terms of the streetscaping on the project. So where we're at today, we are finalizing our plans. We intend to bid this project in the upcoming weeks or open it for advertising. Construction is anticipated to begin later this summer in August, and completion of the full project will be in the fall of 2017. This graphic is showing our proposed construction staging. Work will begin on the westbound lanes. We will have a full closure